The Citizen's Handbook. The Citizen's Handbook.
Kia ora, my name's Robbie and welcome to this Citizen's Handbook election special. Today, we're talking about the Cannabis Legalization and Control Referendum, which is a title designed to make something that's fun to talk about sound really, really boring, like calling a roller coaster a pointless little train. Now, a quick warning, if you don't like jokes about weed because you think it's too serious a subject, you can simply stop watching this video right now. RNZ has a lot of other content. We had to make a video on euthanasia.
Just make it funny, Robbie.
I can't. So please just let us have this, okay? Okay, so let's start with the stuff that everyone agrees on. Firstly, there's a referendum on recreational cannabis this year, and you can vote on it from the 3rd to the
17th of October.
There you go. No arguments there. Secondly, the cannabis referendum is non-binding. If the majority of voters vote no, then we just send a general vibe to Parliament that most of us are like, yeah, nah. And if they vote yes, then Parliament gets a general vibe that most voters are like, yeah, nah, yeah. What the government chooses to do with that general vibe is entirely up to them. A yes vote does not mean that weed is automatically legal. The referendum is just telling your dad what you want from the supermarket. You've expressed an opinion, now all you can do is cross your fingers and hope. Now, the exact question you'll be asked on the referendum paper is, do you support the proposed Cannabis Legalization and Control Bill? To which you might say, do I support the what? Which is a smart question. The Cannabis Legalization and Control Bill is called the Cannabis Legalization and Control Bill because it was named by people who want you to vote yes. And cannabis tests better with undecided voters than sticky buds. And the word control makes old people feel safe. You're voting on whether or not you support the draft legislation, which the government might change when they turn it into law. The government has basically said, if I got a pepperoni pizza, would anybody be keen? But ultimately, once the group has said, yeah, we are keen, the real discussions begin. And you may well end up with a Mr. Wedge. But let's look at the initial pepperoni suggestion anyway. What does the proposed draft legislation say? Well, the main thing it does, unsurprisingly, is legalise buying, selling and growing weed. But then come the restrictions. It's time for a list. Here are some of the restrictions proposed in the draft legislation you're voting on. 1. You have to be 20 or over to buy weed, grow weed, or go into a weed shop, which is bad news for teens who only go to Cosmic Corner for the scented candles. 2. Unlike everything else, you can't buy weed online, making weed shops the only physical shops that will still exist in 10 years' time. 3. You're only allowed to consume your cannabis on private property or specially licensed premises, which means, yes, you'll have to smoke weed before you go to the park and play on the swings for an hour. 4. There's a limit on how strong cannabis for sale can be, and you can only buy 14 grams a day. For context, 14 grams is a lot of weed. It's not enough to take down an elephant, but it is enough to make the elephant get a lot more out of the matrix. 5. It's illegal to advertise cannabis, and there will be health warnings attached to cannabis like the horrible ones on cigarette packets. The cannabis health warnings will even have the ability to talk, assuming you're sufficiently high. 6. Your cannabis company can only sell 20% of the entire national supply of weed, which is bad news for the tiny Venn diagram overlap of stoners and ruthless corporate execs.
Ah, shit.
And 7. You can't sell cannabis products that might appeal to children, which is why you won't be seeing a green wiggle anytime soon. There are more restrictions than that, but those were the only ones we could write jokes for. Okay, so that's what you're voting on. Recreational marijuana will become legal, but there will be a bunch of restrictions. Now, let's get into the controversial stuff. What will happen if the government legalizes weed, and what will happen if they don't? Ultimately, this is all guesswork. We don't have a magical orb to see into the future, even if some stoners think that we do. But we do know some things. Let's start with health. According to 2 long-running New Zealand studies, most New Zealanders have tried cannabis at some point, and most of them are fine. But contrary to what your flatmate has said at every party you ever had, cannabis does have negative health effects. It's broadly accepted that cannabis is less harmful than alcohol or tobacco or getting run over by a horse. But roughly 1 in 5 users of cannabis develop anxiety, sleeping problems, and depression. And if you're a young person, it gets worse. If you smoke weed before you're 15, you have a 1 in 10 chance of developing psychosis by the time you're 26. Just like doing the dishes, weed is mostly not that big a deal for adults, but mostly a very big deal for teenagers. Okay, those are the health effects. So what will legalization do to usage? The evidence from overseas suggests that legalization leads to a slight increase in occasional adult users. For young users, the evidence suggests there will be a slight increase, or a slight decrease, or actually no change in use at all. Basically, we don't know what will happen to usage. New Zealand is different to those overseas examples. I mean, listen to our vowels. We're very unpredictable. So, what about the effects of the criminal system? Firstly, the whole illegal thing hasn't been brilliant at stopping people from using cannabis. Most Kiwis have used it, and 1/3 of those Kiwis use it every week. Punishing people for cannabis offences also hasn't worked super great. After people are arrested or convicted, 95% of them either continue or increase their cannabis use, which is a success rate you might charitably call a failure. Now, recent changes to the Misuse of Drugs Act mean that increasingly few people actually get charged with cannabis-related offences, which is good and bad. On the one hand, it's good for people who would otherwise go to prison, because prison has a tendency to ruin your whole life. But on the other hand, letting cops decide who to charge means that it's more illegal for some people than others, which isn't how laws are supposed to work. And because of racism, it means that Māori are 3 times more likely to be arrested for weed crimes than non-Māori. That's obviously really bad. But it could be an argument for legalization, or it could be an argument to properly enforce the current law on everyone, even white people in a shirt and tie. The big question is whether giving people a criminal record or sending them to prison, both of which definitely have negative effects on people's lives, is worth it to try and prevent some people from using cannabis, a drug which can have negative effects on people's lives. Luckily, that's not my decision. I'm just a bunch of pixels on a screen and I don't really exist. The real decision is up to you. Now, I know what you're thinking. There's one group of people who will be heavily affected by this referendum that I haven't talked about yet. But don't worry, we haven't forgotten them.
Is you or someone you know worried about what to do with your time now that cannabis is legal in New Zealand? Have you spent years of your life campaigning for legal weed? Have you attended protests, ridden to Parliament, only to be totally blindsided when they went ahead and did it? Then the Home for Retired Cannabis Activists might be for you. At the Home for Retired Cannabis Activists, you can paint your own signs to hold up at one of our daily protests. You can bore people you don't know, explaining why it's immoral to make nature illegal. You can even register your own political party that no one will vote for. Here at the Home for Retired Cannabis Activists, we get it. We know it's hard and scary to come to terms with a world where cannabis is legal, especially when you made campaigning for legal weed basically your whole personality. Luckily, after one day at our facility, we guarantee your little activists a good night's sleep, or your money back. Great stuff. Oh, bumped you. Sorry. So come on down to the Home for Retired Cannabis Activists, because even though your country doesn't need you anymore, we do! Great stuff, guys. They're loving it.
That's all the time we have. Thank you so much for watching. Share this video if you think it will help someone start thinking about the issue, and be sure to do your research. I'm sure you'll make the right decision, whatever it is. Good luck and happy voting.
The citizens have